Guess who started the year off with the vid? We start our journey with the latest game release, actually. Final Fantasy VII, The First Soldier. Now, the original The First Soldier, game-wise, was a mobile phone, battle royale, third-person shooter. It was filled with microtransactions for skins and weapons, which was received as critically as you'd expect. It lasted a year and 2 months. The game took place 18 years before the events of Final Fantasy VII proper. It chronicled the soldier program in its infancy, allowing its players to fight to the death in a virtual battle simulator. They chose their class, weapons, and summons, and while the game itself died, it lives on in the game Ever Crisis. It is filled with microtransactions for skins and weapons, which was received as critically as you'd expect. Meh. While the Battle Royale portion is dead, it focuses on 4 soldiers in the program's history. As of writing this, only 5 chapters are out, so I will update their adventures as they continue to roll out. Hopefully it will happen before Rebirth, considering I believe Glenn can be seen at Rufus's president inauguration in Rebirth's release date trailer. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Right now, we have a Mako site to excavate. With the war with Wutai underway, Midgar would now have to increase its Mako production, leading the surrounding area to wither away as spirit energy is siphoned so people can turn on a lamp. Shinra needs this war to be over soon. Luckily, the Soldier project was really making strides by this time. The First Soldier storyline in Ever Crisis follows a 3-person team of P0 soldier operatives. Glenn Lodbrok, the impulsive, joke-filled leader that wears his heart on his sleeve, Matt Windsor, the analytical support with knowledge on the operation, and Lucia Lin, the level-headed sharpshooter that keeps the team on track. They are the First Soldiers. And they are tasked with the mission of gaining control over the Redor archipelago so that Shinra can smack another Mako reactor on the world map and call it a day. Speaking of which, this archipelago is brand new territory lore-wise. Going by the topography of the islands and comparing the shape, it would most likely be here. We begin at where I believe is Wutai. It could very well be the night Genesis Rapsados was declared MIA in Wutai. In the distance, for a brief moment, we see what looks like a pagoda, after which we see shots of dozens of slain behemoths. Sephiroth is attempting to call his friend Genesis, who isn't answering. While it's possible this was the same night as the end of the Wutai War, the rain wasn't present during that mission. Sephiroth was part of B Unit, which was in charge of providing a distraction. What he did for that distraction is still unknown, so I'm willing to not dismiss it entirely, except for the fact that they just set off a bomb, but it seems a little unlikely. Unless there was another mission where Genesis got captured, I'm going with my headcanon that this moment takes place 1 month before the end of the Wutai War. So our boy, Sephiroth, has just shown that you ain't shit. Get used to it, as he's just decimated like dozens of behemoths. After getting sent to voicemail by his BFF, Sephiroth is attacked by a cloaked figure. A cloaked figure that Sephiroth recognizes, Glenn Lodbrok. Yo. Judging from the interaction between these two, Sephiroth is surprised to see Glenn, meaning that he's either surprised to see Glenn on the opposing side attacking him, and or he's surprised to see Glenn alive. Since Glenn is taunting Sephiroth for trying to call Genesis, I think Glenn is one of the many soldier operatives who deserted along with Genesis. We'll touch back on this interaction at a later date. In the meantime, let's get back to the First Soldier in regards to the timeline. After a year of VR training, Glenn, Matt, and Lucia earn the ability to go on missions as official P0 soldiers. Shinra dispatches Team Glenn to the Redor archipelago on a surveying mission. Now for the reason why we're in the Redor archipelago in the first place. Aerith and her mother Eupholie are still locked up in Shinra HQ. The sequence of events I'm about to state are taken from the novel Traces of Two Pasts by Kazuhige Nojima, who was the scenario writer for Final Fantasy VII and its spin-off movies, books, and current games. Aerith was raised in the Shinra building from the years of 1985 to 1992, while Eupholie was taken down to R&D for experiments. Aerith had a caretaker during the day in the Shinra building named Mariel and her son Lonnie. One day in the building, Mariel was talking about how Lonnie got scared by a rat, with Lonnie claiming it was huge. As he began to draw it, Aerith claimed that his drawing didn't look like a rat at all, so she began drawing one, and then began drawing other animals, and landscapes, and faces, and monsters. It was like she was possessed. Lonnie and Mariel called for help only for Hojo to walk in. After a quick observation, Hojo stated, "Aerith, you've awakened." And so begins the Special Geological Survey Initiative. Great name, guys. Shinra believes that maybe one of these landscapes could house the fabled Promised Land where copious amounts of Mako will reside. The initiative only existed for a brief window, 15 years ago. The surveyors were enlisted men and women who volunteered for the program and found themselves reporting to President Shinra. Selection came with a sizable bump in rank, and if the surveyors successfully completed his or her mission, the promised rewards were enormous. Because the archipelago is very dangerous, normal troopers won't be enough to secure a site. Hence, Shinra allows the brand new soldier members of Team Glenn to complete the operation. On the way to the archipelago, Team Glenn are attacked and suffer from the common helicopter issue of losing the cockpit. I'm sorry, how? After surviving the crash, they land on a smaller island known as Shijad. It is filled with monsters called Balor that apparently reproduce faster than rabbits because they just keep coming. The Balors surround the group but are thwarted by none other than a dog. He's a super dog! Team Glenn is safe thanks to Rescue the dog, who is such a good boy, yes he is, and his owner, Rosen, or whatever. Rosen is the only Redorian on this island. His job is to notify the main island about any dangers he finds. By using the giant chimney stack, danger is communicated through smoke colors. Yellow means precautions should be taken, red means to evacuate immediately, white means that he's still alive. Rosen helps explain how the islands operate. The archipelago is very rich in spirit energy, or mana as they call it. Its richness usually leads to violent torrents and storms, leading the Redorans to the brink of extinction on more than one account. Seems very Sin-like from Final Fantasy X. I swear to Gaia, if Final Fantasy X is actually connected to Final Fantasy VII, I have to go through all the lore of that as well. I'm going to swan dive off my roof. So Rosen agrees to help the team get to the main island. While yes, they mean to do harm, Rosen does not have the ability to stop them. By getting them to the main island, the Redoran forces can deal with Team Glenn. Team Glenn leaves the island. After a bittersweet goodbye between good people under opposing circumstances, Team Glenn arrives at the main islands of Bodoras.
I'm one to talk. I'm with soldiers, so fighting's all I do. Sorting things out is someone else's job. What's going on? Who's the enemy? It makes no difference to me!
Matt and Glenn met on the battlefield. They were originally just normal Shinra troopers about to get eaten by a rampaging behemoth, saved only because Lucia is a great shot. Matt Windsor was given the name of Professor by Glenn, a name he detests, to the point that this intellectual is not above stooping down to name-calling against his own teammates when he feels he's been disrespected enough. Very little is known of his past, but I'm willing to assume he's a man who has been ridiculed in his life for his interest in knowledge. Most likely, he joined the Shinra army for the sole purpose of traveling the globe, observing and chronicling things unseen and facts unknown, saying, quote, "The quest for knowledge is its own reward." While he will butt heads with Glenn on proper course of action as well as his leader's stubbornness and lack of ability to think before acting, he will still follow his orders. Probably because Matt's intelligent enough to realize that while Glenn gets final say on their next course of action, Glenn has taken into consideration Matt's input. His tactical mind is valued, whereas in the Shinra army, you are just another trooper. Current fate, unknown. Lucia Lin, also known as Mark's Queen by Glenn, is an expert marksman.
Bitches love cannons.
She usually serves as the team's tiebreaker, but at the end of the day, she just wants the mission completed. How it's done is a matter of semantics. If Matt is the brains and Glenn is the leader, Lucia would most likely be the soldier. No, I'm not trying to make a pun. She has a military soldier's mindset. Complete the mission, follow orders, execute plans with precision, and move on to the next objective. Lucia is also very contemplative and a little lonely. She finds herself unable to connect with anyone in her daily life, considering she trains new recruits a majority of the time. Team Glenn is the only time she feels like she can be herself. Current fate, unknown. Upon arrival on the Badoros coast, the team climbs Mount Sunsin and come across a ruin. From here, they must now complete the steps given to secure a site for Shinra. Step 1, establish a base. Step 2, use the Mako detection kit to find an excavation site. Step 3, transmit coordinates of the site. Step 4, secure the site's surrounding area. Step 5, provide security for engineers and equipment. After traversing the ruin, the Mako detection kit finds a potential candidate for a reactor. Now comes the hard part. The Redorans decide to attack the team. Coordinates were sent, but now the team has to survive the onslaught. Outgunned, outmanned, outnumbered, outplanned, Team Glenn is prepared to go out fighting. Luckily, a guardian angel was looking out for them.
Oh my god, he's so goddamn cool!
So this is where things get interesting. Sephiroth informs Team Glenn that he is one of Hojo's soldiers. This forced me to take a better look at the difference between P0 soldiers and soldier operatives going forward. Here's what I found. P0 soldiers are unmodified troopers that showed amazing skills. Because Gast's research wasn't recovered at the time, the P0 soldier project was a means to push human limitations to its peak with no enhancements. But by the time Sephiroth arrived on the scene in Rador, Hojo had the information he needed to create the soldiers we know today by showering the candidates in Mako and a couple of Genova cells thrown in, eventually making P0 soldiers obsolete and expendable. And how better to further this point by Sephiroth now assuming command of Team Glenn. Glenn is reasonably pissed, going so far as to call Sephiroth a cyborg, as in not human.
All hail Sephiroth, huh?
So smug. But for how long?
I knew ever since I was a child. I was not like the others. I knew mine was a special existence. But this was not what I meant. Am I a human being?
Glenn Lodbrok is an interesting individual. He's a gambler with an impressive amount of debt. The whole reason he took on this mission was for his grandmother. She is currently sick and Glenn needs the money. Money is the initial motivator for him, but it comes from a good place. Unafraid to be himself, he displays an air of a slacker, always cracking jokes, seemingly not taking things seriously, and rather headstrong to the point of impulsive actions and behavior. He seems like the worst candidate for a leader. However, while not the most intelligent, he is wiser than what he's given credit for. Glenn knows his weaknesses, so he built a team to cover for what he lacks. He's a guy who wears his heart on his sleeve for better or for worse. Glenn also had this innate ability of judging situations and people, calling it his gut feeling. For example, while Matt is very cautious of Rosen, considering they're in enemy territory, Glenn can tell that Rosen means no harm, which he was right about. When the team is being bombarded by missile fire in a cave while Lucia suggests leaving, Glenn declines, saying that it's not a good idea. If she had run, it's very possible she would have died. And now, on to Sephiroth. I'm going to be coming back to him a lot in this series. Alright assholes, strap yourselves in because I'm about to enter my Charlie Day arc. Using some math and looking over years and events indicated from the timeline, I have an estimation on how old Sephiroth is at this point in time. I believe Sephiroth is possibly 14 going on 15. Let me explain. The Jenova project took place starting in September of 1977 and ended in 1982 with Professor Gast leaving Shinra. If we take into account Lucrezia and Hojo deciding super early in the project to make a child imbued with Jenova cells, we're looking at 8 to 9 months carriage to term. Jenova and weird magic being taken into consideration, even 1 to 9 months still puts us in this range. Here's why. Professor Gast left Shinra by 1982, being murdered in 1985. Sephiroth in the other titles speaks very highly of Gast and less of Hojo. So what, Sephiroth's a reader and an intelligent mind. It's very possible that he just read his research during his time growing up in Shinra. However, when Sephiroth finds information on the Jenova project in the Crisis Saga, he asks aloud,
Professor Gast, why didn't you tell me? Why did you die?
Am I wrong in assuming that Gast was perhaps a big part of Sephiroth's upbringing? I would go as far as to say that Gast was the only one that cared for Sephiroth. If my theory is correct, Sephiroth would be maybe 4 years old at the time. Old enough to remember Gast and have conversations with him, but I also acknowledge that I could be feeding way too far into this and could be completely wrong.
Because God has cursed me for my hubris, and my work is never finished.
But back to the game. Sephiroth wastes no time taking charge of the mission. Having already pinpointed the Redorans' location while on the chopper to get here, he plans for the team's infiltration method. At daybreak, he whistles for the team to assemble. Glenn was not having that, taking it as a sign of superiority on Sephiroth's part, whistling the team together like dogs. Glenn, still probably knowing full well that Sephiroth would wipe the floor with him in an instant, did not hesitate threatening Sephiroth for doing that. And suddenly, Sephiroth's lack of experience with commanding and people skills shows itself. Shortly after that interaction, Sephiroth apologizes and spills the truth, that this is actually his first field mission. By this time, Sephiroth has become the face of the Shinra's Soldier Initiative, with accolades of glory and being labeled as a hero just to get more people to join up for Soldier, which, to be fair, worked. Yet he's never even spoken to a person outside of Hojo's lab, let alone stepped foot on a real battlefield. And from this show of honesty, Sephiroth deflates, revealing his sense of inadequacy. But Glenn doesn't care, stating that Sephiroth's power and skills outweigh his lack of experience, that now's his chance to be a hero. But Sephiroth doesn't want to be a hero. He just wants to be normal. Now, I don't know about you, but whenever I find a group of people I begin to feel comfortable with, I ask them about my mom. Sephiroth shows a picture of his mother to this group, asking if any of them have ever seen her. And this is the first interaction he's had with Shinra employees not on Hojo's watch. But one thing of note is that while the picture of his mother is correct, Sephiroth refers to Lucrezia as Jenova. The picture was given to him by Hojo, but Hojo, being the bastard he is, twists the truth. It's here that Sephiroth states that this is the first time he's ever had fun, let alone have friends. Wow, could someone give him a hug, please? Our team has found the Redorans' hideout. Here, Sephiroth has his Anakin Skywalker moment, stating that everyone needs to be wiped out.
And not just the men, but the women, and the children, too.
But when Glenn questions if it's necessary to wipe them out, Sephiroth states, "This island belongs to Shinra. Let's remind them of that."
Red flag!
To ensure no one escapes, Sephiroth tells the team to split up. Upon meeting back up, Sephiroth has finished off the remaining Redors. Here we see Sephiroth at his most vulnerable. We get a glimpse of the principles he was taught, how mercy is non-existent to your enemies. But one thing I want to focus on is Sephiroth talking about underestimating your opponents. He reveals that he actually got hurt by a child. He let his guard down around them and the child struck. The children and the elderly are still a threat and not to be written off because of their age. Sephiroth states, "People make assumptions about me too, and I strive every day to prove them wrong." It's safe to assume that since Sephiroth was born and raised to be Shinra's biggest deterrent against their enemies, that he was raised to be devoid of emotions, which is difficult to do considering he is a child. Sephiroth is a lost soul. He's being trained as Jenova's offspring, but still has his humanities from his human parents. He's being raised as a monster, but he wants to live a normal life. And then, Glenn hugs him and tries to convince Sephiroth that while yes, it's live or die on the battlefield, Sephiroth has the power to show compassion. He's more than capable of winning a fight. He doesn't need to prove that. Sephiroth's only reply is, "I'm not a cyborg." That response means so much than I initially thought. Number one, the fact that Sephiroth responds with that after stating his need to prove himself speaks to the idea that Sephiroth held on to that insult. Another name calling out to his supposed lack of humanity, a simple cog in the war machine following orders in a human body. Number 2, Sephiroth says this as if he's also trying to convince himself. He doesn't want to be labeled a cyborg or ruthless killing machine, and yet the actions he displayed lend itself to the contrary. Sephiroth knows what he's capable of. He's displayed that long before this moment. In Crisis Core, he even states that he's always known he was special. It's easy to say that you're human, but can you really believe that when not a single other human can do what you do? We end the first soldier with a look at Rosen near his chimney as Refu looks on at his master. The chimney smoke remains the color white, as Team Glenn ponders if Rosen ever considered the thought that he will eventually be the last Redoran. In the trailer for this game, we see a brief interaction between Rosen and Sephiroth, meaning that this story is not done yet. Problem is, I have less than 2 months to finish this series, so when the next chapter, The First Soldier, comes out, I'll cover it then. Meanwhile, back at Shinra HQ, Hojo's experiments have gotten even more cruel. With Aerith showing signs of Cetra abilities, her mother, Eupholie, is now expendable, so preservation is no longer a concern. Eupholie has limited time left to get Aerith out of here. Luckily, Eupholie's handler, Faz, has a crush on her and wants to help. Faz hides Eupholie and Aerith in a crate and sends them on Shinra transport set for the Sector 4 slums, where they will hide in Faz's apartment. After arrival, Eupholie begins going in a different direction from Sector 4, stating that she heard stories of a church in Sector 5 and that they will hide there instead of with Faz. After hours of wandering, they make it to the Sector 5 station, but Eupholie can't take another step. On the verge of death, Aerith pleads for people to help, but only one does. A woman named Elmira Gainsborough. Eupholie brings Aerith close.
"This is for you,"
she said, pulling a small cloth pouch from her pocket.
"My father left it for me, whose mother left it to him, whose mother before left it for her. It connects the Cetra, linking us together."
Eupholie's last words are directed to the only person who bothered to help, Elmira, uttering a desperate plea.
"Please, take Aerith somewhere safe."
Next video, we enter the Crisis series. It will easily be my biggest video. May have to split it into 2 separate parts, we'll see. Thanks for watching, hope you found this video helpful. Don't forget to comment on anything I missed during this section in the timeline, and I'll see you in the next video.